Hello. So today I'm not filming at my house, I'm filming at a family member's house because I'm taking care of a family member who fell and got injured. So I'm going to be here for a little bit, and that's why I wasn't able to film last week, if anyone noticed. That's when it all happened, so I was busy taking care of them. But I was sitting here thinking about some things, and I thought that I would just make a quick little video, just sort of a chit chat with some fabric sounds. I have this pillow here that has these ridges in it, makes nice sounds. And then my skirt waistband also kind of makes nice sounds. So I'm just gonna sort of chit chat with you, talk about some things that have been on my mind, and just make some various fabric sounds. So if that sounds good, then stick around, because here we go. So what's been on my mind lately was free will, and how exercising our free will makes us the most authentic versions of ourselves. So I was listening to this guy talk, and he was a sort of like behavior specialist. He was saying that all of our behaviors are a result of our genetics, and that he would be able to predict any one of our behaviors if he had our genetic chart to look at. So, certain people are more predisposed to, have anxiety or depression, or be fear-based, or, have addictive personality types, etc. And he was saying that if he could see, our genetic makeup, that in any given situation, he would know what decision we would make in that moment. And I just thought that was really, really dismissive, because it doesn't explain free will, which, in my opinion, is the thing that makes us the most authentic version of who we really are, and the thing that, separates us from animals and sort of, lower species that are just going based off their own instincts. I'm going to give like a couple examples of why I think that free will is one of the most important components in terms of feeling happy and satisfied in our lives. So for example, I'm going to speak for myself. It's my nature to be shy and introverted and sort of like a hermit. That's my nature. That's what my biology and genes, push me towards. But that's never sat right with me. So from a very early age, I would force myself to join school plays, to audition for things, to make myself and force myself to be uncomfortable. It was something that, even as a child, I knew was important, to let my nature define who I was. And that's something that I think is true of so many people. You think about people that have an addictive personality type, and who are sort of pushed and geared towards wanting to have a drink every single day, or abuse substances in some way, shape, or form. And every day they make the conscious decision, every moment even, they're making a conscious decision to fight against their nature. And it's interesting because, I think oftentimes we'll reward people for the things that come naturally to them. Certain people just don't have that craving that they have to fight against every day. Or say even, for example, someone who's predisposed to want to be like a cheater in terms of like cheating in your relationship. There's certain people that just would never occur to them. That's not who they are. And then there's certain people that have to consciously fight against those temptations every single day. And it's kind of, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on it, but in my opinion, the people that are fighting against their demons and their temptations and their natural instinct every single day in making the conscious decision rather than just this automatic decision, I almost find them to be more heroic and more admirable than the people that certain things just come naturally to them. Does that make sense in any sort of way? Am I crazy for thinking that? It's just, because we don't choose our fears, we don't choose our compulsions, but we do choose whether or not we're going to act on them or whether or not we are going to wake up every single day and fight against them. And for me personally, I just feel like the people that wake up every day and choose to make the right decision, I just feel like that's so much more heroic than the people that don't have any sort of inner battles that they're fighting against. I think that those people who are born with certain behaviors that are just more, moral or desirable from, a societal perspective, and they don't have any inner battles to fight, I think they're just very lucky, but I don't know if I would say they're better people. Another example would be sort of like, this is just something that's external. That kind of made me think it's on the same page, but a friend of mine was, saying to me sort of recently, commenting that it's, admirable if the fact that I stay in shape and like, fitness and, those things are sort of important to me. And I was saying that's not really something I can take any credit for. That's my natural predisposition. That's something that there's like a compulsion for me to do that. It would be challenging for me not to work out because I'm so pulled to do it, and I'm so pulled to eat healthy. Even as like a child, that was something that I would always ask my mom, like, is this good for my body before I would eat something? It's just something that's innate within me. So I can't consider that to be disciplined because it's my nature to want to do that. It would take discipline for me to say, you know what, today I'm not going to work out. Today I'm going to have a cheat day. I'm going to eat what I want. And I'm just gonna have like a lazy, relaxing day because that goes against my nature. And I was explaining to her, like, she's like a highly organized person, and all of her drawers are organized. She has like the day planner and all those things. Like her whole life is very structured, and that's not my nature. And for her, that just comes naturally. It causes her to feel more serene and more at peace when things are organized, where for me it just, it's sort of irrelevant. So for her doing that, that's not really discipline. That just comes naturally to her. That's what she's sort of, for her, keeping a very organized house is something that, reduces her levels of stress and anxiety. And for me, working out is something that has that effect for me. So it's just, I don't think that we can take credit for the things that we're like pulled to do. Like we all have our own strengths and we all have our own weaknesses. I'm sure you can think about things that you do that you're proud of, but that it would give you, stress and anxiety if you did not do them. And then there's the types of things you have to really push yourself to do. And it seems like there's a couple things that sort of like motivate all behavior. And those are like fears, laziness, and then like compulsions. And I've realized that the more you fight against those three things and kind of do the opposite of them, the more you're exercising like your own free will and the more alive you feel. Because you don't feel like you're just a slave to your own biology and like your own genes. You actually feel like you're the ghost inside the machine. Like you are truly in the driver's seat. Like you're the one steering the vehicle as opposed to the vehicle, leading you. I don't know if you ever saw the movie with Jim Carrey. It was called Yes Man. And in that movie, he decides that he's going to say yes to every single decision. Like, every opportunity that comes his way, he's going to say yes to everything. And the profound, it's a lighthearted comedy, but like the profound effect that has on his life and how it completely takes him in all these different directions simply by saying yes to everything. So I don't necessarily think that we should say yes to everything. I think that's like an oversimplification of it. I think that we have to look at every decision and see if it could lead to our own personal growth and betterment, to say either yes or no to it, in terms of it going completely against our nature. So say, for example, like it's your nature not to go on a roller coaster, like you're just absolutely terrified of them. Saying yes to going on a roller coaster just because you're afraid of them, like, I don't think that in and of itself, even though it is conquering a fear, and maybe I'm just saying this because that's my personal fear and I don't want to do it, but like, I don't think that saying yes to everything that we're afraid of is beneficial. Me going to Magic Mountain and riding every ride there, I don't think that's going to have like a profound like transformation over me other than just making me like really physically ill. But me saying yes to something that I fear, that I actually want to do, that I know would improve me, but that I'm scared to do, such as public speaking. So that's something that my entire life I was always so afraid of, and it bothered me. Like, I don't think whether or not I'm able to go on roller coasters or not is going to really change my life in any, beneficial way. But being able to like freely speak your mind publicly, that's something that can feel so stifling and so restrictive if that is a fear, at least for me. It felt very, very stifling to constantly feel the need to have to edit myself and diminish myself in public situations, because I just felt, I don't know, I guess I just felt really vulnerable being seen. Just like the act of being seen made me feel uncomfortable. And to the degree that, like, I even wore a hat. Like, I think for like 2 years straight, almost. I mean, it's pretty odd. But yeah, in high school, I pretty much wore a hat every single day. Because it was almost like I was like an ostrich in a way, and I could like stick my head down into a hole, and it made me feel, this sounds sort of crazy saying it out loud, but yeah, it made me feel sort of safe in a way to have that hat on, because it was just like, you know, if you're wearing a hat with a brim, it's like if you feel someone's looking at you and you like just tilt your head down, it's like you've essentially just like blocked them out. And there was something that felt like very safe about that to me. Like, it actually physically pained me to even have people looking at me, which is so odd since, you know, like, this is my job now. But I hated that about myself. I didn't want that to be the case. You know, I saw that as a weakness. So it's something that I've like actively fought against virtually every day. And while it has gotten easier, that's something I'll always have to, I'll always have to fight. Every day I have to make like the conscious decision not to, just allow my nature to make the decisions for me. And I always just think of that expression, feel the fear and do it anyways. Because fear is so greedy. If you don't constantly check it and you don't constantly put it in its place, it just like spreads throughout you like a virus. Fear is something that's never going to be content to just stay in its lane. So say, for example, like you had one small fear, like, it just started off as, well, I'll use mine, for example, like a fear of public speaking. So say it started off for me as a child, being in class and like not wanting to raise my hand, and just being quiet in class. And my fear is what stopped me from ever participating in that specific setting. When you allow fear to control you in that setting, it gives power to fear. It's sort of like a bully. And then the fear says, oh, well, I was able to make them not do that. Let's see what else I can control them with. And then it's going to be, okay, well, now you're afraid not just to raise your hand in class. You're afraid to just speak in front of a group of 5 people. You're not going to even do that. And then next thing you know, you get to a point where down the line, maybe you're agoraphobic and you don't even want to leave your house any longer because the fear just kept growing and getting stronger than you. And the longer you allow it to go unchecked, the stronger and stronger it becomes, and the harder and harder it is to fight against. And it is the same thing of any bully. The longer you let a bully pick on you and you don't stand up for yourself, the more helpless you begin feeling and the more empowered that bully starts feeling. And you just have to sort of like nip things in the bud as soon as they arrive. I just think it's really, really important that our spirit always stays stronger than our mind. 'Cause I don't know why this is. I don't know if, it's just from, being sort of, I don't know, feeling insecure as kids, or the way we were raised, or the way our parents talk to us, or whatever. But I think we all have this inner critic, this inner voice that kind of wants to keep us small. And if we listen to that voice and we allow that voice to dictate the chances that we take, we're going to live a life that feels like we're locked inside of a cage. But if you can allow, like, your spirit, like the part of you that is not, it sounds kind of weird to say, but like not of this world, that's not of this body. Like the part of you that existed before you were in this farm, and the part of you that's going to exist long after you cease to exist here. If you let that part of yourself take the reins, it's so interesting to see the direction like that your life ends up going. I'm not religious per se, but there are a lot of people in my family that are. And this one family member was sort of talking to me about like the Holy Ghost. Like you always say, like the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost. And he was explaining about how, the Holy Ghost can only walk with you when you're on the right path. And the Holy Ghost can't accompany you when you're doing the things that you're not supposed to be doing, and when you're not, living in accordance with like your own personal truth. And what's interesting, and I don't know if this is true for you, but I feel like it is true for me. Like when I make decisions, and I'm not trying to act like I always make the right decisions. I make shitty decisions all the time. So like when I make like a shitty decision, and I'm doing what I'm not supposed to be doing, like there's this certain feeling that you have, like that you are like letting yourself down in some regard. It's not a good feeling. And it's so interesting that it's like our feelings are almost this, barometer that allows you to intuitively know whether or not you're on the right path, or whether or not you're starting to like veer off course. And what's like, I think sort of detrimental in today's society is we are sort of like taught to suppress those emotions. There's like pills for anxiety and depression, and all these sort of side effects to maybe not being on the right path. And I'm not saying that's the only cause of them, but they definitely do come up when you aren't living sort of in accordance to what your personal path is. What I'm trying to say is, like, I think it's important to not numb out like all undesirable feelings like anxiety and depression and all those types of things, because they're like our guides that let us know whether or not we're headed in the right direction. And if we're completely numb, then it's so much harder to gauge whether or not we're going the right way. I just think it's kind of like the difference between, hiking on a marked trail as opposed to like an unmarked trail. obviously, it's not impossible to still get from point A to point B on an unmarked trail, but it's so much easier if there's signs along the way that are, helping to guide you. This is just kind of like a ramble. There's been like a lot of things that have happened in my life recently that have caused me to be sort of more introspective. Another thing that I realized recently is like the people that show up for us in life, like when we need them, they're not usually the people that we expect it to be, which is sort of interesting. It's not always the people that verbally appear to have your back the most. It seems like in life, at least for me, the people that have shown up for me always sort of like these people that maybe never said to me like I'm always going to be there for you, or like I always have your back type of thing. They're just someone who was kind of like a periphery person, but like when the shit hit the fan, they were the ones that stepped up. And it's always just so surprising and so interesting who those people are going to be. So just like to kind of keep that in mind. Talk is definitely cheap, and you really don't get to find out sort of like who your true ride or die friends are until you're actually in a situation where you need help. And it's hard to ever see someone the same way again after a situation like that. And it's just sort of like a public service announcement, because I always did this myself. Like when somebody was in a bad situation or going through something like really tough time, I would send the text message that said, let me know if you need help. And now being in a situation with a family member where they were like really badly hurt, and I was seeing them get all these text messages from people saying, let me know if you need help. I realized like most people are never gonna say, I need help. Like it's kind of useless to send that text message. Like it makes us feel good when we send it, and I would feel good about myself when I was in that position and I would send it. And then you kind of feel like, well, I put it out there. But like 99.9% of the time, no one's going to actually say, I need help. So it's like if you actually genuinely want to do something, just do it. It was kind of interesting, like I was saying, the people that have shown up for this family member of mine in this hard time, they weren't, she has 2 sisters who she's like, she considered her best friend, and they were like nowhere to be seen in this situation, even though they would always, say like, oh, you're my rock and all that kind of stuff. But when, the shit actually did hit the fan, like they didn't want to be bothered. And it was just so interesting because like, and then there's like this neighbor that lives a couple houses down that, my family members, like, I would say they're an acquaintance more than like they're not family like her sisters. And that person has just like shown up with care packages and shown up with food and like was, helping to water and like, doing actual acts of service and showing compassion. And I was telling this family member, like, the same thing was true of me when I was going through my divorce. Like the people that I thought were going to be there for me, they weren't the ones that were actually there for me. And it's just really interesting how situations like these, redefine who our new closest allies are. And you can never, unsee that, once someone's revealed to you, like who they truly are. It's like you can't unsee it. So, yeah, no, it's like all of her relationships are completely redefined now. And that's a whole other tangent. I won't even go off on that. So anyways, I don't know if any of this was at all useful. I was just feeling very like introspective and contemplative lately, and thought I would share some of my little musings. I was also just thinking about how, if anyone's even still listening to this, I was thinking about how, oftentimes like when we're attracted to someone, like we'll sort of give them the benefit of the doubt and sort of think of all these attributes that they might possess just because we like the way that they look, and we assume all these things of them. And then the same is true of like people that look a way that we feel is undesirable. And they had done all these studies with young children where they would have like a teacher come into the room and they would say like, oh, this is going to be your prospective teacher. And they would have her come in and say like the exact same thing. They had like a script they were supposed to say. And the first teacher that comes in is like, really pretty. She reads the exact same script, say it's like 1 minute long, says a couple things to the kids and then leaves the room. And then they would have an unattractive, person come in and say like the exact same things to the students. And then they would ask them like, oh, like which one do you think was a better person? And which one do you think was kinder? And, so on and so forth. And like they would always choose like the more attractive person. And it's just, that just, and I was just kind of thinking about how like the best connections I've had in life are the connections I've had when people were sort of like the opposite of what my expectation was of them. And those types of friendships usually happen more in work situations and like school, because like you're allowed to, continually see this same person like time after time and like get to, see who they really are, as opposed to, like if you're just going to meet someone at a party that you're just going to see, once or whatever. It's interesting the friendships that we get to make at a job or at school when compatibility is able to sort of like shine brighter than first perceptions of someone. So I've just realized like in life, like, first perceptions are so misleading. I know it sounds sort of naive, but it's just, so many times, like when a relationship comes to an end or something of that nature that was based on like a first perception, it's harder to let go of the idea of who that person was than who that person actually was. Because like when you look at the reality of like who some people are, like it's so different than like what your fantasy or expectation of that person was going to be. And like that's the part that's like actually harder to say goodbye to than the reality of them. But then as opposed to like the types of people that, you know, are like that's the slow burn that, you know, maybe they didn't jump out at you immediately and your feelings about them weren't based on, you know, projection. It was based on you slowly getting to know them over time, and it was based on like actual truths and like revelations of, you know, seeing them in situations and like compatibility and whatnot. And yeah, just how those friendships and those relationships are often like just so much more real. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure there's been, you know, if you're a guy, like, I'm sure there's been like a woman that you met and like you were really attracted to her and she was super pretty, and so like you just sort of like assumed all these things about her and all these like good qualities, and then you know, you start to realize like, oh man, she's actually like a really horrible person over time. But like the breakup can still kind of hurt because it's like you have to say goodbye to, you know, the idea of them, and like that's the part that's hard to get over. It's like not even them that's hard to get over because they were like kind of a douche, but you know, like the idea of them. Yeah, I've realized like in life so often getting over the idea of something is so much harder than getting over the reality of something. Because so often like the reality is really super subpar. Like we're able to create this like fantasy in our head and be like so attached to it, and it never even like actually existed at all. But that doesn't mean that we still don't mourn the loss of, you know, the fantasy. So yeah, I guess like the 3 takeaways from this video are: stand up to your fear, stand up to your nature, allow your spirit to be stronger than, you know, just your own fears, and to not judge books by their cover, and to, you know, I guess to keep an open mind, and to also be conscious of the fact that we all have things that come easily for us, and that we all have things that, you know, come much harder for us, and to, you know, give yourself grace, because we all, you know, have our own different struggles. And I didn't talk about this, but as long as we're throwing things out there, don't take things personally, because, you know, it's never a reflection of you. It's always just a reflection of the other person. Literally everything, even things that seem personal. It's just a reflection of the other person. It's never a reflection of you. All right, well, I think that's enough rambling for one video.